We are sitting here at Dargit Brewery in beautiful Yerevan, Armenia. Cheers. I would use their word for cheers, but I don't know it right now. It has been an incredible trip thus far. I'm just going to give you a little overview of everything in its entirety, and then I can go into more specific detail about each spot. But we arrived in Copenhagen. It was excellent. I'd been for 3 or 4 days, maybe 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, and really enjoyed it. Wanted to come back. Alexa had never been, and we had an awesome time. We kind of roamed around and hung out and checked out Christiana, which is like it's almost like an enclave within, like a park enclave within Copenhagen. It's really cool, beautiful, nice lakes. It reminds me a lot of where I grew up in northern Florida, just marshes and fairly flat, but had a great time. And then we just walked around the city and really tried to check everything out, and it was a blast. From there, we flew to Tbilisi, Georgia, and Georgia's been a country that was high on my list for a long time, and we absolutely loved it. Tbilisi itself is a fairly cosmopolitan city, and large, definitely larger than I thought it was. But lots of traffic, a little bit of congestion, but aside from that, absolutely stunning. People are great. There's a cool vibe. There's a young kind of vibe and a neat scene with regard to like craft beer and just a cool food culture. I really enjoyed it. But we knew that we wanted to kind of venture out, because you don't necessarily go to Georgia for the urban core. You go for the natural beauty. And so we headed up north. It was about a 3-hour. What did we take there? We took I guess a shared taxi to Stepantsminda, also known as Kazbegi, Georgia. There's a famous monastery. I call it the Kazbegi Monastery. I think technically it's like the Kazbegi Trinity Monastery that's up on this hill on top of a mountain. Super iconic, at least for travelers. I think it's a fairly iconic photo. So we got to Stepantsminda. It's a small mountainy town. It reminds me of a kind of an underdeveloped Zermatt, Switzerland, kind of, and it had a blast. We did the hike the first day up to the monastery. Super cool. Again, we are here at Kazbegi Castle. You can't see it now. Alexa has a message for you.
I climbed the mountain today.
Should have taken a half hour and it took 2.
Shut up.
Nice chilly weather, so that was helpful. Took us I think a couple hours round trip, because Alexa was a slowpoke, but we made it, and it was really awesome. That was kind of like the beginning of our experience. And so we had 3 days in Kazbegi, and so the second day we kind of just chilled, and we meandered around, got some information from tour guides, or not tour guides, like a tourism bureau essentially, regarding a hike for the following day. We just started our hike in Juta. It is 7 o'clock on the dot, and we already have a defeated Alexa Sevilla walking towards us. That confidence where she said she climbed the mountain, I'm not seeing it right now.
It's in my tired legs.
But it's going to be a good one today. And then we had read a review about this little restaurant called Kazbegi Good Food, and decided to go there. I'm a cheapskate, so it said it was inexpensive and very good. And so we went, and it was absolutely incredible. And the guy who owns the place was a character. He's really awesome, super nice guy. I started talking to him just about his life and the development of Kazbegi, what she deemed to be good and bad, kind of the balance of life in general, but also a little bit regarding how Georgia fits into the whole European picture, economically, socially, and also kind of his take on the politics of the United States. From Stepan Sminda, we went back to Tbilisi, and then immediately to the Georgian wine region of Signahi. Well, actually, the wine region, the region is Kakheti, and we went to the small city of Signahi. You might as well be in Tuscany somewhere. It is absolutely gorgeous. The Georgians have the longest proven history of wine consumption and most likely production, over 8,000 years, so 6,000 BC. I believe that predates any type of proof of beer fermentation or anything like that that would be coming from Egypt. So at that point you realize that the Caucasus region is more rich in history than most people would think or give it credit. I've come to kind of realize that this is one of the kind of cradles, so to speak, of civilization. And even as a world history teacher, and what you read, it's not really mentioned a whole lot in that regard. I mean, you hear a little bit of here and there, but that's not one of the major points of emphasis, I think, when it comes to the development of culture and the spread of ideas and you know, early technologies and things like that. But Signahi was awesome. We spent a lot of time drinking wine, which is why I took a couple pictures. It was incredible. Everyone makes their wine at home, so it hasn't had time to kind of settle. And so some people frown upon that, but for me, I thought it was really tasty, and I think also that ensures that there's no real preservatives that are used in it as well. We stayed at a guest house with this woman, Maka, who's my age. Her dad ran one of the universities in Georgia prior to the Soviet takeover or Soviet absorption, whatever you want to call it. And from there, he kind of remained in education here and there. Well, she married this guy, Noda, from a village over, and they have this little guest house, and it really was an awesome experience. We had connected with a couple in Tbilisi on a walking tour, Alex and Jasmine from Quebec, and really enjoyed their company on the walking tour. And we walked into the guest house, and Alex was just there, and he had this big grin on his face and was just like, I can't believe you guys are here. And they had, after we had broken off, they had met this French couple who was also staying at the guest house with us, Simone and Marie. And so the three couples had a wonderful dinner cooked by Maka, and she really made us feel at home and had a good, cute sense of humor, and just a really sweet person. It was an awesome experience to be with her and her family. It was really an awesome time hanging out with Alex, Jasmine, Simone, and Marie as well, and getting just different perspectives on the world, and again, realizing this is why travel is awesome, that we're way more similar than we are different. And so we had a wonderful night. The next day, Alex and I spent the majority of the day in this little winery, or not a winery, a little kind of restaurant that Maka had suggested to us. She said that her wine was the best, and it was very good, Maka, but this wine was also incredible. Probably the best one I've ever had, called Moronchi. And we stayed there for the majority of the day, just kind of drank their homemade wine. It was incredibly inexpensive, which also helps the wallet, but just a beautiful, beautiful experience. And then that night, we met up with the two couples again, had a nice dinner, and then proceeded to go to this little kind of bar for a nightcap where there was a 16-year-old little kid bartender. It was funny as shit. Ended up taking a shot of absinthe with them, which did not help my ride the next day back to Tbilisi. But awesome time. Next morning, we're at the bus station. We see this kid comes up, says, Kyle, da da da. It was just, again, proof that it's a small world, and it was really nice to kind of see him before we departed. And so Simone, Marie, Alexa, myself went back to Tbilisi that day. It was a tough ride just because I was, feeling not good. But as we get back to Tbilisi, and had pretty much all day to kill because we were taking a night train to Yerevan. And a guy that I had met, Nick LeConte, who we met 3 years ago in Albania, in this little town called Skoder, where you kind of go to northern Albania before you do this big hike in the Albanian Alps. He is kind of has decided over the last few years that he's just going to travel for his life and just really embrace it. And he has started an e-commerce business. And anyway, I saw something that he had posted saying he was in Signahi, and I wrote him and said we should connect. And he said, "Oh, well, I'm back in Tbilisi, but when you guys get there, hit me up." And so since we had all day to really kill before this night train, we met up with Nick at a coffee shop and really got to catch up and just hear about his travels. And we talked about ours, and it was a great way to spend the afternoon despite being brutally hungover. And so after that, we could get on this night train, which was as nice as it's going to be. I felt disgusting because it was like hot as hell in Tbilisi, and so you're sweating all day, and so you're kind of nasty, and there's no showers and stuff on the night train. But it was as perfect as it could be, and we arrived in Yerevan really not knowing what to expect, because we had been thinking about possibly doing Azerbaijan after Signahi, because it's fairly close, but it was going to take too long to get the visa, and we had already kind of planned on going to Armenia. And I tell you, I am so incredibly happy that we did opt to go to Armenia, because we had some of the more real experiences that I've ever had traveling, and I'm glad Alexa got to see that as well, because I know she was a little bit hesitant just to come to the region in general, and I think that this experience really showed her not only the value of travel, but just how pure people can be abroad. We're told sometimes some things about other parts of the world, and my big takeaway always is you can't judge an area by what you're told in the media or offhand by other people. You've got to come experience it. 9 times out of 10, when you do that, you're going to realize that everything you heard was totally inaccurate. People are just off base. We got to Yerevan super early. Yerevan kind of starts coming alive a little bit later in the morning, so we stumbled upon this kind of a continental all-you-can-eat breakfast at this hotel. Alexa got some breakfast. We did a little bit of research while waiting to check into our Airbnb, and then really just enjoyed the day. And it did a walking tour. It was an incredible walking tour. The gentleman Baco, who's an artist here, kind of gave us some of the history of Armenia, but also a little bit of the nitty-gritty aspects of it, and the alternative sides to and stories to the city. And it was awesome, and we really had another great set of people on the tour. We met a couple, Martin and Nagin. Martin is German, Nagin is from Tehran, Iran, and they both work in Iran. So we had a great first day in Yerevan. We wound up here at Dargit, sitting right over there that first night, and another dude who was on the walking tour with us, Tomasz from Poland, joined us for a couple of beers, and again, just a wonderful opportunity to connect with somebody who's also had unique travel experiences, and he and I found out that we've had some similar ones. We talked a lot about Ohrid Lake in Macedonia and how beautiful that was, and how just interesting that the country of Macedonia is. I know they've changed their name now, but it's an awesome time. And we, from there, decided the next day that we were going to go into what is an internationally unrecognized country currently called Artsakh, formerly Nagorno-Karabakh, which is nestled in between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Ethnically Armenian, internationally it is kind of recognized as a region within Azerbaijan, but internally within the country they see themselves as unique. I think they identify more obviously with being Armenians, but they have a unique language, they have a president, they do use the Armenian dram, but they are full-fledged Artsakhians at heart. And so we went to the capital, Stepanakert, and ended up staying in a guest house with this woman Nellie and her daughter Anna. Nellie is probably in her mid to early 40s. Anna was 16. Anna spoke great English, and really had an awesome time with them. The first day we explored Stepanakert, and saw the city come alive at night. It's a fairly quiet city during the day, and that evening it was awesome. They had just come off of hosting a big soccer tournament there, and so you could still kind of see the last vestiges of that, some stages and things, but had a wonderful night. The next day, walked around the city, ate at this restaurant called Florence Garden, which we really liked, at a nice little terrace. And that night, Nellie and Anna, along with Nellie's parents and her brother, invited us to have a barbecue at the house, and that was awesome. And was able to talk to Nellie's parents, via Anna, who was translating, about their lives living in, the Soviet era and moving through kind of Armenia gaining its independence, and then the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan over Artsakh. And just, it was a humbling experience. They were very, very nice people, and also had a pretty good sense of humor. My kind of brutal humor translated a little bit, and I got a lot of good laughs. I think that Graham actually really liked me because I was ripping on her husband a lot, and he took it in stride. It was really, really fun. And so that was an awesome way to end our couple days in Artsakh. And then the next day, Anna and her grandfather drove us back to Yerevan. And so en route to Yerevan, we stopped at 3 of the more historical centers of Armenia. And the first was Tatev Monastery in Tatev, Armenia, which is in southeastern Armenia, close to the Artsakhian border. And this monastery has been it was initially constructed in the 6th century, and then really started gaining prominence in the 9th. And it's nestled in the mountains. We took the world's longest cable car, 3.5 miles, to get there. Surreal experience, super foggy and just kind of mystical. We are near Tatev village on our way to one of the older monasteries in Armenia, but honestly, Tatev, it was built initially in the 6th century, and then it really developed in full in the 9th, and then by the 10th century it was the center of philosophy and rhetoric and literature in all of Armenia. And it ended up being destroyed in the 13th century, probably 1256, when the Mongols invaded, and the 10,000 manuscripts that were housed there all were lost in the first day of that Mongol raid. So it's kind of sad, but this will be a pretty interesting experience. And so we get there, and we start reading up on things, and so when the Mongols invaded in, I think, 1256, they took the monastery, they destroyed the 10,000 manuscripts that were there, and so then it was really kind of an era of rebuilding after that, and the monastery became actually Armenia's most significant university from the 1300s through, I think, the 1500s or so. A lot of grammarians and philosophers and writers would study there. I think the degrees took 7 to 8 years, and you kind of understand why, because it is so isolated. I couldn't imagine having to get there prior to a cable car or roads. So but it was super, just again, kind of had a mysterious feel and really great. And then you find out that in the right before, so Armenia was free or was independent rather, for a couple years in between World War I and then the Soviet Union absorbing them. And so you find out that actually Tatev became, for about 3 or 4 months, its own republic within Armenia called the Republic of Mountainous Armenia, led by this gentleman, and I forget his name at this point, Grigory something, I believe. But so that was kind of interesting to hear. And now Tatev, really, the goal of the cable car, which they developed in 2010, was to promote tourism and then generate some capital to end up rebuilding and refurbishing kind of the Tatep monastery. But so that was awesome. And then after that, we drove to the next monastery, which was a completely different, like, geographical or physical aesthetic, I guess. And you almost felt like you were in New Mexico or something. A lot of that red rock, and it was called the Noravank Monastery, and that had been around, I want to say, since the 13th century. And Noravank translates to new monastery, so not all that new, but at the time it was a new monastery, and that was a beautiful sight to see. That area, there's a lot of like cave dwellings, the little monasteries kind of built within the sides of caves. Almost reminded me of Cappadocia a little bit in Turkey, but I think a little bit more powerful than Cappadocia. And so after Noravank, we drove to our last monastery, which is called Horvarap, which is about 45 minutes outside of Yerevan, and you actually have a beautiful view of Mount Ararat in the background, which is now modern-day Turkey. The Empire of Armenia, so to speak, actually a lot of it, and two of the more important capitals within their history have fall in what is now modern-day Turkey. So we didn't access Ararat at its base, but from Horvarap you could see it's a beautiful shot of that. And they say that the fabled Noah's Ark rests in Mount Ararat. Nobody really seems to believe that, but that's what's said, and maybe they would believe it more if they were generating the tourist dollars and not Turkey. But nonetheless, that was just super cool to see. And so Horvarap, another super fascinating monastery. I believe it's the oldest monastery in the world. It was built by a gentleman from the Arsacid, and I might be pronouncing that wrong, empire, which they think was like an offshoot of a Parthian empire, or like a old Persian empire. And in the 200s, Horvarap was kind of the center of this Arsacid or Arsacid dynasty, and a guy and his sister, who were really credited with bringing Christianity to Armenia and Georgia, Gregory the Illuminator. I'm forgetting the sister's name. She's now a saint in Georgia, but forgetting her name at the moment.
It's Nino.
So Gregory the Illuminator and his sister Saint Nino, who are credited with bringing Christianity to the region. Gregory's a focus of this monastery. So this gentleman who ruled this empire there in the mid 200s, let's say AD. Gregory comes to spread the teachings of Christ, the words of Christ, and you kind of come to realize that what we see now is like the teachings of Christianity are very different, I think, than what these people back then would have been teaching. I don't think it was really necessarily about spiritual or esoteric salvation. It was more about living your life kind of in a different way, in a way that was more connected with humanity, and I can get into that later. But so Gregory comes to spread the word and gets in prison for 14 years in this monastery in Horvarap, and I went into the little dungeon where he was held, and it was pretty bleak, to say the least, but super fascinating. And anyway, he apparently, this leader falls ill, and the wife, who'd already kind of converted to Christianity, kind of convinces this dude that, hey, you need to accept Christianity, accept Gregory, and maybe things will start changing. And as the story goes, he did get better. But it sounds like Gregory became more of like a kind of like a consul, or a consort rather, to this king. And that's really how Armenia becomes in 301 the first proper, dynastic group, so to speak, to embrace Christianity as a quote-unquote like national religion. And so that was very interesting. And then it slowly spreads to Georgia, spread also to Ethiopia. But so that was just really awesome. Then so from there, we're kind of blown away. My grandparents
on both sides, very Catholic, a Christian in general, but my mom's dad has since passed away. He was probably the least religious of them all, but my dad's two parents are very religious, and they've also passed, and so I was able to go light a candle that Anna gave us made out of honey. Alexa and I both did, and that was really, really special. Just I'm not really that religious, but just to go and have them in my thoughts, and my mom, who's is sick. She's doing well, but I was able to say a little prayer for her too, and that was a really cool moment. And so we leave for Vrap, and again we're like 45 minutes away from Yerevan, and we're driving around, and we see a double rainbow, and I just thought it was kind of cool. I don't know if I've ever really seen a double rainbow before. And Anna said, yeah, I think there's some significance to that. Alexa looked it up, and it just said that, it's significant of transformation and being on the right path, and being, steadfast in your intuition, and there's a spiritual component as well. And so that was nice, and that we had kind of just been to this monastery, thinking about, people that really made me who I am, or were so formative in who I've become, and that was just cool and affirming to see. And also I've been thinking a lot about maybe transitioning and traveling and more, and doing that kind of for my life, and interviewing people and giving others some insight and perspective into other people's lives, because I think it's just really, really important. And we've got not only do we have the ability to do so, but because we're in an age where you can so easily sway someone's opinion about another group without them ever experiencing it, I think it's important to push back, against that with giving people some insight into others' lives, because again, you realize that everyone's the same. And so that was really cool, as we kind of got back into Yerevan. And then we were in Yerevan for 2 days, and we hung out a lot here, had quite a few beers, and just took in the city. Yerevan is really a cool city. There's a lot going on. It's very forward thinking, and not necessarily cosmopolitan in an ethnic sense, but there's just a lot going on. It's a very cultured city, a lot of cool art happening. We saw Botero, which I was kind of surprised to see in kind of one of their center squares, but just really cool things happening in the city, and I've fallen in love with it. It's a place that I definitely want to come back to. I could even see myself living here as like a base, just because you are so centrally located, and there are so many cool things to do. They got an old opera that was voted like the most impressive building in the world, I think in like the 1930s. They're really kind of developing a lot of things, not necessarily for tourists, but I think just for the people of Yerevan to appreciate. And I really see this city blowing up, so to speak, and really coming into its own even more over the next 5 or 10 years. And it's something I'm really excited to see, because I think there's so much that it has to offer, and if people would do a little research and give it a chance, they would realize that this place rivals any city in Western Europe. I mean, the architecture overall might not necessarily be on par, but in terms of the people and the essence, it's amazing. And so we are unfortunately departing today. We're taking a train back to Tbilisi, and then we fly to Bucharest early morning tomorrow, and the next chapter of our trip begins.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, where are we?
We are in a second-class cabin of a train from Yerevan back to Tbilisi. I say that jokingly because, despite what the conditions may suggest, the first class accommodation was the exact same, just with the two of us as opposed to 2 additional people. So Alexa's feeling a little cramped. I'm taking it in stride, enjoying my Dargit, trying to figure out whether or not it's best to rent a car to go from Bucharest to Cluj to Budapest, or to maybe do a shared taxi or something like that. So trying to figure that out, and just loving life.
We're going back to Tbilisi now, and then on to Armenia.